Hey everybody, welcome back to Big Apple Hockey. It is time for our weekly show. We know we got to spend a little bit of time together yesterday after the news of Peter Laviolette going to the New York Rangers. I screwed it up. Damn it. Laviolette. There you go. And
Winner is on, everybody. Number one already happened.
Number one already on. I am the great mispronouncer, Mr. Marc Williams.
I'm glad you said that. Hey.
And I am joined by the host of the Final Buzzer with John Falkowski, Mr. John Falkowski.
I mean, that's kind of redundant, but yeah. Mispronunciation counter at 1. That's great. We got that out of the way right away, which is just excellent. But congratulations to the Vegas Golden Knights. Congratulations to Bruce Cassidy. What a story that is. And I know we're going to be talking about that more. And as we spoke about yesterday, welcome to New York, Peter Laviolette. Now it's your turn to lead this team to the promised land.
And the man who first got to see him in action, Mr. Anthony Larocco.
Yeah, a long time ago, but nonetheless, as Phil said, congratulations to the Vegas Golden Knights. Capped off a great NHL season by winning the Stanley Cup. Kudos to them, their fans, players. And now the offseason has officially begun, boys. As my bottom tagline says, let the silly season begin. The buyout window opens on Friday. Draft in 2 weeks. Free agency about 2 or 3 days after the draft. Let's go.
And you know what, Anthony? Your tagline is more than appropriate because the silly season coming right now, and it is going to be very, very silly. We're already starting to get some trades coming in that happened during the Stanley Cup Finals. Can't believe they were allowed to do that, or at least that they were able to make the trade and announce it. But also, as I mentioned before, we had our stream reacting to the Peter Laviolette signing, and I'll be doing that probably the rest of his 10-year year. And also the Big Apple Hockey Twitter.
Real quick, and I should say that DraftKings should have like a prop bet on how many times you mess up the pronunciation of that name in the episode, because that would be incredible, and I think that would get so many people involved with DraftKings.
Well, if we end up at the draft in a couple weeks, then then it's going to be me mispronouncing players, and we won't be able to do the Marc drinking game. So that's just going to be even worse. But the A block is brought to you by SeatGeek, everybody. SeatGeek, use the promo code Big Apple Hockey. Get $20 off on your first order. Hockey might be done, but you could use it. Baseball and concerts, anything. So let's start with last night, guys. And the Vegas Golden Knights are the 2023 Stanley Cup champion, beating the Florida Panthers 9-3 in Game 5. More on that in a moment. But I got to say this. Jonathan Marchessault, Conn Smythe Trophy. We're going to get back to him in a second, and the Conn Smythe. Phil, I'm going to start with you. What is your thoughts on the finals and what stood out to you?
Vegas was just a faster team. I think they were better structured. I think this is why people have referred to Bruce Cassidy as one of the better coaches in the league for the last few years. I think Vegas was a deeper team as well. I think Florida's lack of depth really shined in this series, because I think a lot of the matchups involving the bottom six, I think Vegas won those and won them handily. Sergei Bobrovsky was great up until this series, and I think Vegas just said, hey, this Cinderella story ends here. And if Bobrovsky played more like the Bobrovsky of the regular season, I mean, you can only turn back the clock for so long, I guess, most athletes. I mean, Carey Price had that magical run in 2021 where everybody thought, he looks like he's back. And then it just kind of came to a halt, and then it was just nothing after that. But Bobrovsky just was not the same goaltender that he was in the first 3 rounds. Alex Barkov couldn't get it done offensively. He just wasn't good enough for them. Carter Verhaeghe scored some key goals at times, needed more from him. I said guys like Bennett and Reinhart, and I specifically pointed to Reinhart because I thought he'd be able to help against Jack Eichel. But, I mean, you needed a lot more from guys like that. And Anthony Duclair just coming back, couldn't give enough. But Vegas they had the depth, they had the speed, they had the rough and tumble type players. And then you got the key injuries in that series. Ekblad playing hurt, Montour playing hurt, Tkachuk getting hurt in the middle of the series. And that was just it. I mean, Florida did what they could. At least they got their first Stanley Cup Finals win. I mean,
and coming back from a 3-0 deficit.
Yeah.
At that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so to do it. So, by the way, I mean, I kind of feel bad for Florida. It would have been cool to see Matt Tkachuk win one, but I'm happy for Vegas. I'm happy for Jonathan Marchessault winning the Conn Smythe because that guy is literally the definition of the progression of hockey. And that is that in the 90s, we went from drafting all these big centers and defensemen to try to combat guys like Eric Lindros because Eric Lindros took the league by storm. And we said, well, everybody that's too small, that's under 5'10" and under 185 or 190 pounds is too small to play in this league. Well, you had guys like Theo Fleury and Marty St. Louis in there that came along and said, screw that, we're going to break past that mold. You know what? Jonathan Marchessault was passed over by a lot of teams, including the New York Rangers, who couldn't keep him in the fold. And he bounced from team to team. He found his way to Florida. He found success in Florida under Gerard Gallant, funny enough. And they let him go because they wanted to protect Alex Petrovic. Remember that name. Just remember that name. Florida.
And Riley Smith.
They let Riley Smith go too. So this whole team forms as an island of misfit toys. And Jonathan Marchessault is right at the forefront of it in 2018 with that whole incident and the shooting and how everything came together and they were galvanized. They almost get there, almost win the whole thing. Alexander Ovechkin, Evgeny Kuznetsov put a stop to that, obviously.
And Braden Holtby literally on Alex Tuck.
Yeah, Braden Holtby with the save of the playoffs that year, maybe even the save of the year that year. But, they come back 5 seasons later, and here they are. And owner Bill Foley said playoffs in 3, cup in 6. Prophecy fulfilled. Here we are, cup in 6. So, Jonathan Marchessault, hat off to you. You're a pain in the ass when you're playing against my Rangers, and I wish they would have never given up on you and let you go. But hats off to you. You're a hell of a player. You got it done. Tied for the playoff leading goals. I believe was either first or second in points.
He was tied. He was tied with Draisaitl.
Tied with Draisaitl in goals. I'm talking about points.
Points, I think he was second.
Second, yeah. So, but I don't care about Brett Howden. Whatever. I know Ranger fans are gonna say this. Oh, Brett Howden, it's on the cup. Let that one get. Whatever.
As the meme I put out last night about that, Philk, Brett Howden is on the cup. Michael Roosevelt is on the cup. Michael Del Zotto is on the cup. It's just a fact of life. That's how it is.
Yeah, and it's how it is. It happens. He wasn't a major contributor, but I mean, good for him. I don't really care. But Jonathan Marchessault, and even more so, Jack Eichel, for what you went through in Buffalo and how Kevin Adams dragged him through the mud, and that organization wouldn't let him go, held him hostage, basically. He goes and he gets a cup there. Good for you, Jack. You deserved it. He played well, and he shut a lot of critics up who thought he was a soft, one-dimensional player that wouldn't get it done in the playoffs, too, en route to getting that cup. So good for Jack Eichel as well.
And of course, as you were mentioning before, how the Rangers had Jonathan Marchessault, there have been Islander fans that have been saying on how, if only we held on to Carter Verhaeghe. Anthony, you would obviously contradict him on that because it took him 2 more stops before eventually Verhaeghe became the player that he became. But also, what were your thoughts on the Stanley Cup Finals?
I mean, you could tell Vegas was clearly, the better team. If it weren't for Tkachuk's heroics with tying the game in Game 3, this could have been a sweep. Vegas just outmatched them. Like I said, they played with much more pace in their game. They're a deeper team. And then ultimately, honestly, I mean, I don't want to put the blame on one player, and that's not really what I'm doing. But Sergei Bobrovsky, kind of almost reverted back to the Bobrovsky during the regular season. He wasn't nearly as good as he was in the prior rounds. And that was honestly the difference maker. Adin Hill outplayed him. And Bobrovsky, while, there were some games that he certainly held the Panthers in it, overall, his play dropped significantly. And I think, that obviously hurt the Panthers a lot. And then also, Tkachuk fracturing his damn sternum in game 3 and, then playing game 4, through that. I mean, that kind of hurt them too. I mean, he's definitely their best player, and him not at full health, hurt them for sure. But overall, you just got to give Vegas the kudos. I mean, they went out, they had a job to do, and they outplayed Florida in every facet of the game. And don't forget they got contributions from even the lesser known players. Like Amadio was solid for them. Nicholas Waugh was good. Brett Howden, even Kolasar, those guys played hard. They played hard, they chipped in. And then on top of that, you had their best players being their best players, as Marc, Eichel, William Karlsson, Riley Smith. So they got contributions up and down the lineup. Adin Hill was great. And it was the perfect storm for them to win their first Stanley Cup. So good on them. Now at the beginning of a new season. We'll see which directions these two teams go, if they really make much changes. But overall, I mean, it wasn't one of the most entertaining Stanley Cup final in the last couple of years, but it was still fun to watch if you're a diehard hockey fan.
I thought game 1 was good. Game 3 was good. Game 2 was a snooze fest. Game 4 was good. And game 5, I'm going to give my thoughts on game 5 in just a moment. But I have to look at this series as a whole and just think Vegas, I think everybody grossly underestimated Vegas's depth. And I think it's because it seemed like they were top heavy versus Dallas, but their depth really showed in this series. Yeah, another thing about this series was we kind of thought it was going to be Adin Hill coming back to earth. And it was Sergei Bobrovsky that came back to earth. Bobrovsky had that huge save in game 3 where I think it was about with the 4 minutes remaining, he kicked out the left pad to make a big stop. And then Panthers would go back the other way and tie. As Willie's saying right here, Panthers finally look like the team that just snuck in.
You can't say it any better.
Yeah, great run still, but Vegas has been building this team towards this for years. I think you're right about that. And I think there's not enough credit a little bit to what Florida built this year. They tried to take a step back to move forward. And you see that sometimes with organizations. We're going to get to more about that in a minute. But it's something that you can't just quantify. I always talk about it, Phil, the Brendan Shanahan trade. Like, where does Detroit go in 1996? They just had the most points ever in the history of the NHL. And then they're like, all right, what are we missing? I mean, we got Dino Ciccarelli. They got plenty of tough guys. They moved out Dino Ciccarelli, who, if my memory serves correctly, I think he did have a 30-goal season that year. We'll check on that in a second.
97, yes.
Right. And then you move back in Brendan Shanahan, who was unhappy being in Hartford, for Paul Coffey, who was unhappy being in Hartford after that. And you move out Keith Primeau, who is another guy that everybody went, wow, they're trading Keith Primeau too. That guy's got a whole lot of toughness. And then you go and they win the next 2 cups and they manhandle the Avalanche in 97. I think they beat them in 6. But still beating the Avalanche in 6. I mean, they were the ones that were swatted out in 6 the first time around. So when you look at what Vegas was able to do, like their defense, they run out 5 of the best 6 the league sees every single night, from top to bottom. And then you might get whoever on the 6th defense. And then you kind of looked at as far as a matchup in a playoff series, Phil. They split up Karlsson, and it was Karlsson, Eichel. The Karlsson line ended up being the matchup line, and I think it was him, Riley Smith, and I think Brett Howden at one point. But then I have to remember what my lines were. But Karlsson as a matchup center was just fantastic in this series. I'm just recalling all the Vegas forwards at the moment, but then it came to game. Let me just get to game 5. I got to get to this. Game 5, Florida scores second or to tie the. Oh no, Florida made it. Vegas made it 2-0. Florida made it 2-1. Vegas then comes out 5-1 by the end of the second period.
Yeah, barrage.
In the third period, Phil, and I got into a debate with people on Twitter about this. In the third period, Vegas was still pressing the Florida blue line for turnovers and converted a couple more goals. Their final score was 9-3. Did they needlessly run it up in this game?
No. It is a Stanley Cup. You were playing for the Stanley Cup, and that's it. And it's funny because we always have this discussion when it comes to like playing against a team in a beer league when they're running up the score. Oh, what are you playing for the Stanley Cup? What is it, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals? No, this is the Stanley Cup clinching game. They do everything that they possibly can do to make sure that they win that game, and they did. I have no problem with it. I don't. The only thing I have a problem with is the fact that this series was probably the least entertaining Stanley Cup Final series I've watched in a very, very long time, probably going back to when Detroit swept Washington in 1998, because that series was just – I mean, I loved seeing Detroit winning back-to-back, especially for Konstantinov being in the wheelchair and everything like that. But, boy, was this series just not fun, and the refereeing was horrendous in this series. Just, you know what? I don't think Florida would have beaten Vegas regardless, but I would have liked to have seen it with officiating on even grounds and consistent officiating, because that's part of what made this series just so boring to watch, because Florida just felt like they were fighting off not only Vegas, but they were fighting off the officials as well. And you want to call it a reputation? Fine. You do that in the regular season, not in the playoffs. It's unacceptable to do in the playoffs. You just can't do it. But again, I'm not giving Florida an excuse. I don't think they would have beaten Vegas regardless after seeing how this series went. But you just cannot call the game the way that they called it, and it just it makes the game far less entertaining. 2, it makes the game about the officials, not about the players that are actually playing the game on the ice. 3, it takes away from the overall product. And just, I just wanted to see a fun, because this was a series where I really didn't care who won. I didn't.
Yeah.
I thought Florida was going to win. But if you remember one thing I said, and I think it really came into factor here because Vegas played like it, those guys still had that sour taste in their mouths from 2018. And a lot of those guys are still on that team. So
5 of them, they all started last night.
Yeah. So I would quote Uma Thurman in Kill Bill and just say, Stanley Cup, we have unfinished business, because that's really what it was, and that was the mentality that they came in with.
Anthony, what do you think? Last night, did Vegas run it up on Florida?
No, I think Vegas was just they were just pushing they were pushing the pace, controlling the game, and it was a 2-1 game. It was a 2-1 game. Florida scored that goal and kind of got back in it. And after they scored that goal, Florida actually had a couple chances to tie it. After that, Vegas took the game away. And I think, Vegas scored those goals 3 and 4, came pretty close together back to back. And they were just rolling. And look, in that situation, you're trying to win the Stanley Cup. You're trying to, accomplish a dream that you had when you were a little kid and first had aspirations of playing in the NHL. And, in this league, you can see what can happen. A lead can vanish in the blink of the eye. And, 4-1, it's like, yeah, the game's in the bag. But those players aren't going to take that chance of the Panthers getting back in the game. So, no, they kept playing their game and they kept scoring goals. I don't think they're running it up. I don't think they did anything wrong. I think Florida's spirit got broken after that 4th goal, and Vegas kept playing, and Florida, didn't. They basically, took down their tent and went home at that point. Kind of left Bobrovsky out to dry too, but it was a defeated team. They ran out of gas, and Vegas took advantage of it. I have no problem with Vegas doing what they did. They were just playing the game of hockey and trying to, make sure they had the cup wrapped up. So no issue with it at all. The Panthers, like I said, they just ran out of gas and they were defeated morally. And I think, they kind of just at that point just wilted.
I think there's a little bit of running it up right there. And I do kind of say it's a little bit of like God of War, the remake there, the updated version that came out, where Atreus walks up to Modi and he's just bloody and beaten, and Atreus stabs him and he falls off the cliff. And they say, "Well, we're gods; we can do whatever we want." There's a little bit of that. Come on,
I don't know. I disagree there because, like, I mean, when it was 5-1, let's just say, Vegas lets off the gas a little bit. The Panthers score. It's 5-2. It's 3-goal lead. You see how many times a 3-goal lead has vanished over the course of this playoffs?
I've seen it, but not with 8 minutes remaining.
I was going to say I think I've counted more games with 3-goal leads this year in the playoffs that have evaporated than in any year in recent memory.
Yeah, most of them were the LA Kings too, so that also was a problem right there. We have one more question for the A block, but first, everybody, we gotta take a message from DraftKings for you guys right now. Hockey fans light the lamp this winter with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. New customers can bet just $5 pregame money line on any NHL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. If that wasn't enough excitement, you can turn small bets into bigger payouts with same-game parlays. Combine multiple bets like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more for your shot at an even bigger payout. Download the DraftKings Sports app now. Use promo code THPN. Bet $5 on any NHL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Only at the DraftKings Sportsbook with code THPN. Okay, everybody, and again, continuing on with the A block. I haven't been able to use this in the last couple weeks, but I had to go back to it also as well. The last question about the Stanley Cup Finals is here we have Florida and Vegas, who came up short the last couple of years. And Anthony, let me start with you. What lessons should the Islanders and the Rangers take from the Panthers and the Golden Knights?
Well, I guess first, what you could take from Florida is that kind of the obvious. All you got to do is just get in, and anything can happen. So the Panthers, we stated numerous times, if the Penguins didn't somehow laughably lose to the Blackhawks at home, they wouldn't have even made the damn playoffs. So yeah,
and the Blackhawks wouldn't have had Connor Bedard.
Yeah.
That's the crazier part.
The what if scenario in a couple of years will be epic on that whole thing. But yeah, you just got to win and get in. So I think not just the Rangers and Islanders, but I think what this might do, going forward is, if you're a team and let's say you're, 4 points out of the playoff spot and you're at the trade deadline and, you see that the teams around you are kind of all on the same level, maybe you still buy or, maybe still do whatever you got to do to try to get in because again, it's rare, but anything can happen once you get in. So, I think the Rangers and Islanders can take that from Florida. And from Vegas, I think it's just the fact that you need skilled players who could play a gritty game. If you really look at it, like Jonathan Marchessault, he's small in stature, and yeah, his main thing is scoring and offense, but he's a pest. He plays hard out there. William Karlsson's definitely a good defensive forward who's, not afraid to grind away. You even got Marc Stone. I mean, Marc Stone's, he's a great captain. He can score, he hits. He's a Selke, finalist more often than not. So I think you just gotta, you got to fill your team with guys who are going to raise their game when, in the playoffs, when stuff really matters. And then the last part is that, they have Sorokin and Shesterkin, so nothing's going to change there. But also, you could win with just average goaltenders. Adin Hill, Darcy Kemper last year, and I think that's going to be something that other teams look at too. Hey, do we, for instance, Pittsburgh, like, do we mortgage the future to trade for a guy like Connor Hellebuck when, you see teams win with goalies who are just kind of, average? So I think that's another thing that teams are going to look at. But, overall, these two teams obviously took very different paths that I think a lot of teams are going to, again, they're going to look at. This is a copycat league, right, fellas? I mean, you saw the Tkachuk for Huberdeau trade. And the dividends that paid off. And I remember when Kyle Dubas had his season-ending presser at Toronto, he was kind of asked about that, and he kind of brought that up about how a trade like that, a 1-for-1, is something that he would look at doing, and I think other GMs might feel the same way. So we'll see what transpires in the offseason, what moves teams make. But I think not just the Rangers and Islanders. I think a lot of teams can kind of learn from how these two teams were built. Totally different, but there's positives to take from each of them.
Phil, what do you think? What's lessons you think you could learn from these two teams?
Leadership. I've said this about the Rangers. The Rangers don't have a strong leadership group, and they don't have a coach that's they do, but they didn't have a coach that was hands-on and really took control of the team when the team needed the ship to be righted. So you didn't have that in New York, but you had that in Vegas. You have that with Mark Stone. You have leaders like Alex Pietrangelo, who was in St. Louis when they won the cup. Jack Eichel was a leader in Buffalo, and I know people are going to be like, well, what did Buffalo accomplish with Jack Eichel? Jack Eichel was a good leader for that team, and that team turned around and dragged him through the mud. I'm not going to get back into that again. I've already beaten that to the dead horse that it is. But the point is that you need strong leadership, and you need players that are going to play the type of hockey that it takes to win in the playoffs. And I know that people are going to look at, the Rangers traded Tony Amonte for Brian Noonan and Stefan Matto. Yeah, sometimes those trades work out, but you need to bring in those players. And your player, that has to be a team-wide mentality. It just can't be certain players that are doing that. And that's what Vegas had. If you watch all their guys up and down the lineup, Marchessault's throwing hits. Stone is throwing hits. Riley Smith's throwing hits. William Karlsson is doing dirty work. Keegan Colasar throws his weight around like a human wrecking ball. He threw a bunch of massive hits in that series. Jack Eichel was even laying people out, and Jack Eichel is not known for that. So the other lesson you got to do is you got to buy in. You got to buy in. And if your team does not buy in, there is zero chance that you will win, because a team with conviction is the team that usually comes out on top. A team that believes in something, a team that believes in each other, believes in a plan, and believes in a mentality. And that's usually the team that wins the Stanley Cup. I know Anthony and I, when we were doing Off the Post back in 2018, we interviewed Joe Beninati and Craig Laughlin, and I actually got to interview Alan May in person at the draft that weekend. And one of the things that Joe Beninati had told us was that they bought into Barry Trotz because they knew that was their last shot. That was their last chance to get the job done with Barry Trotz in Washington, because things were coming to a head. And they bought in, and that's why they won that offseason. Everybody came together. They followed the plan. They trusted the process. They trusted Barry Trotz, and they came out on top. Vegas did the same thing. Bruce Cassidy came in with a plan. He knew what he wanted to do. He had great talent on that roster, and they bought into him from day one. And you know what? It's funny. I'm going to look back at a tweet that I had. I was in a thread with poker legend Daniel Negreanu. If anyone is a big poker fan, Daniel Negreanu is a big, big hockey fan. He's
Canadian, so he has to be.
Yeah, he's from Canada. He's actually I believe he's a Rimouski Oceanic fan, because he's had their jersey. I've seen him wear their jersey at different events over the years for a very long time. He, back in January, basically was saying, throw the towel in. They're not they're not any good, this and that. They stick a fork in them. They're done. Those players at that time, that team was not playing well. They looked like they were only a few points out of first, but they were not playing good hockey. They were very inconsistent. And if there's any lesson to take from that, it's just never give up. St. Louis last in the league January 1st, 2019, and they won the Stanley Cup. So you've got to believe, you've got to buy in.
You know, I'm looking at the Vegas's roster right now. To further talking about what we're discussing, I'm looking. There's literally not one forward I could say with conviction that is soft when I go up and down the line. And maybe Phil Kessel is a guy, but he's literally the only one. Every other forward that you see there, their names, they're all capable of playing a grinding, gritty style. And again, to talk, like, I didn't even realize it, but William Carrier had 16 goals. Guy's a third, fourth line player who's known for defensive and hitting, grinding. 16 goals. Nicholas Waugh, 14 goals. Amadio, 16 goals. These are bottom six players that are scoring, close to
depth wins
over 20 goals. These are guys that have 15 goals or more, and they play in the bottom six, and they'll hit you and play good defense. So. It's their team, their roster was built really, really good.
Hold on. I just want to jump in real quick because this is kind of factoring to what you're saying here, this comment from Court. It has to also be players that contributed heavily and said Stanley Cup, not just your Barclay Goodrows. Yes and no. Because Barclay Goodrow was a good player here. He's been a good player here. The problem is that he's one of the only players that plays in that type of way. And if you want to talk about his skating being a problem, yeah, New Jersey exposed him in that series. But you need a balance of those guys, but you also need your skill guys to buy in and play that physical game come playoff time. Panarin needs to take a note from Marchessault. They're similar size. They're similar stature. But Panarin doesn't play anything like him. He disappears come playoff time. Marchessault shows up, brings his A game, and plays like he's 6'4". He plays like he's Eric Lindros. Panarin plays like Casper the Friendly Ghost. Why is that? It's a mentality. You have to want it. And if Panarin doesn't want it, and guys like that don't want it, it's not going to matter how many Barclay Goodrows you have or don't have on your team. You're not going to win if your top guys aren't going to want to pay the price. See Mike Modano and Steve Yzerman and what Scotty Bowman and Ken Hitchcock did for them.
Exactly. And first off, grit has a couple different ways you could twist that around. You guys talked about the physical part of grit. Well, it's also just grinding out games sometimes.
Yeah.
And you looked at the Florida Panthers in round one, game 5. They needed to get to overtime. They end up keeping the series going. And then Bruins had a lead, I believe, twice in the third period of game 6, and they grinded it out and then won the game in the final minutes. And then Bruins had the lead late in game 7. They grinded it out, got the game tying goal. Carter Verhaeghe dagger killed them in overtime. They grinded out, obviously, the 4 overtime game against Carolina. They grinded it out. They had 6 OT winning goals en route to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they didn't win. So 6 out of their 13 wins were because of overtime winning goals. That's got to be the most since the Canadiens, because the Canadiens were, I think that was 10 en route to the Stanley Cup. But so that's for one thing. But depth, and the Vegas Golden Knights truly let us know what depth is.
Yeah.
And usually you think depth, having an extra forward or two. I don't think the Rangers are going to end up with Tom Wilson.
I don't either, but I would absolutely take Tom Wilson on the Rangers.
I would take Tom Wilson, but I do have a question. Is he physically going to be able to do what he's been doing in his prime? I don't know I think he's a little bit banged up now. We're going to see about that.
I don't see it happening. I mean, the Capitals may very well trade him. I don't see him going to the Rangers, but honestly, Tom Wilson would look good on the Rangers. He's capable of playing on the first line, and he's everything that we've been describing. I mean, every now and then, I think we could all agree he kind of steps over the line. But I mean, he's a guy you love to hate, but you would love to have him on your team. The guy played 33 games this year, and he had 22 points for a guy who's not known to be an offensive player.
Yeah.
That's
his offensive game has come a long way.
The other caveat to it, though, is the price on Tom Wilson. The Capitals are going to get him. They're going to ask for a lot, and I mean, the Rangers.
Well, if Will Cooley wants to be Tom Wilson, go right ahead. You better emulate him. If Will Cooley, who they say he fashions his game after Tom Wilson, you want to do it, you better do it in.
Yeah,
in the
I think this is more likely. I think the Rangers will end up with Garnet Hathaway,
and I agree with that 100%.
I think that you know what, that's one prognostication that I'm pretty safe in making. I think they're going to get him, and you know what, Jesper Fast would be a good addition as well, bringing him back. But I think Garnet Hathaway, with his size and his strength, would be the one that I think they're going to go after.
But just to finish my point, Vegas depth. They weren't that deep to not make the playoffs last year, but then this year you want to see it test their depth. Usually you talk about an extra forward or two, that seventh defenseman that makes a difference, whether it's Doug Lister for the 94 Rangers or Braden Coburn a little bit, or I think Noah Dobson was a seventh defenseman one year with the Islanders. But Vegas went through 5 goaltenders this season, and 3 in the play and 2 in the playoffs. I'm sorry. And turning from Laurent Brossoit to Aiden Hill and saying, Aiden, can you please save us? And the guy turned in a Patrick Waugh type of playoffs.
It's funny. Aiden Hill was traded to them in August, where news is kind of slow, and it's like when it happens, like Aiden Hill, for whatever it was, a 4th, 5th round pick, everyone kind of just dismisses it and be like, whatever. Turns out he's the guy that ultimately wins them the Stanley Cup. So,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've ever seen anything like that.
Yeah.
And by the way, just to mention this, Aiden Hill, 932 save percentage. Filk, who's in second place right now in the NHL playoffs with a 931.
Igor Shesterkin.
Anthony, who's in third place with a 929.
I think you asked us this question a week.
I have. I asked you before the Stanley Cup Finals.
Ilya Sorokin.
I mean, that's insane just to think about, that those guys put in those type of save percentages and their teams lost that series. But look, there's still a lot of things, and obviously Vegas, we're going to be talking more about them and their potential in a moment. But we've got to go to the bar, everybody.
Shot. This is the easiest I've ever to answer.
I'm going to say beer. I can't even begin to describe.
I'm actually going to go crazy. I'm going to buy everybody around on this one. Welcome back, everybody, because it's time for Big Apple Hockey's Bar Talk, where we're gauging our confidence on NHL topics based on our choice of drink. Are you so confident that you're buying everybody around? So I'll just have a beer, or give me a shot. I just want a shot. All right, play along down in the comments below. And as always, we're sponsored by Drizly. Why go to the liquor store and make it a Drizly night? You got a barbecue, you got something, can't get out there? Have somebody else bring everything to you. And of course, as I keep plugging, the Big Apple Hockey Trucker hats, they're in the link below. So we're going to start first with the Islanders, because you look at some of the potential roster moves that they can make, Anthony. And J.G. Pageau has 3 years remaining at $5 million, a limited no-trade clause that kicked in July 1st last year. The Islanders should move out J.G. Pageau.
I love Pageau. I know why a lot of Senator fans were sad to see him go, because, when he's out there, he cares, and he gives it his heart and soul. And he is capable of scoring, 20 goals, but I think, and Lou kind of, actually it was Elliot Friedman that said it after Lou had his presser. He said Lou's very calculated, and, he does and says things for a reason. And he said during his presser, he went out of his way to talk about how they had 5 NHL centers, Barzal, Horvat, Nelson, Cizikas, and Pageau, and that, if should something come along that would get them stronger in another area, he would look at it. And he kind of thought he speculated, which Friedman always does, that wondering, if he said that to kind of let GMs know that, he's willing to trade a center. And we all know it's not Barzell, Horvat, or Nelson. Pajot would be the guy. I think, we talked about it. They need more speed at the wing position. Lee and Palmieri are probably their two best scoring wings. And, Lee, 28 goals, nothing to sneeze at. It's one-dimensional the way he gets his goals in front, and he's not the best skater. And Palmieri is what he is. He's a good piece, but he's not – you don't want him to be your primary goal scoring on the wing. So if they, in a perfect world, could, trade Pajot in either a hockey trade for a similar winger or just trade him for, a prospect or a pick and then use the cap space and go out and get, to improve at the wing position, it could work out that way too. Thing is, they plan on leaving Barzell at the wing most likely, so they would still need to go out and sign a cheaper third line center. But I think it could be the right move. I mean, it might hurt them in the face-off circle and in penalty kill situations. But when you have a surplus at something, right, the strength, sometimes you got to move something out of your strength to improve the weakness. So part of me wants to say round, but I'm gonna stick with beer just because I do love Pajot. I just I think it would make a lot of sense. So we'll see what Lou does, but I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Phil, what do you think?
I'm going round. I thought that this was an excess luxury type trade. To get a player like that, I mean, great third line center, probably one of the best in the league in terms of a third line center, can even play in your top six in a pinch. Very good player, Swiss Army knife type, and a lot of teams would love to have him. But I think at this point they need to address other areas, and you're not going to get the money that you need, the cap space that you need to go get a sniping winger that they need in that top six without moving some salary like Pajot. Pajot's got to move. Bailey's got to move to open up that space. And you know what? You're going to lose some depth, yeah. But you know what? This is it right here. Your third liners should not be making in the range of $5 to $6 million. It's just too much. Just too much. No matter how good someone like JG Pajot is, the cap, when it goes up, then you could revisit that discussion. But as of right now, you cannot have a third line player making $5 million and change. So I think it should be around. I know that I'll get some backlash from my Islander fans probably about that, but you've got to improve in other areas. And I've said it for years. They need a top flight goal scoring winger, and acquiring one is not going to be easy when you have a $5 million third line center. It's just what it is.
And also, what is Cizikas now? Is he 2.5? Anthony, or
2.5 but
he used to be like 3.5, but he took the term on that.
He's the perfect fourth line center, so leave him be where he is. And
no, I'm just saying you got a lot of money invested in your players.
But you could move him up, and he could play third line center.
Yeah, he could.
He's capable, and
I agree with Anthony. He's probably better on the fourth.
He is probably better on the fourth, but he's capable of being a third line center, especially if you've got depth on the wings and you got two good two-way wingers with him. Yeah, he can play as your third line center. You have a cheaper fourth line center, and then you can go get the sniper that you need.
Yeah, he's the only one in that best fourth line that still has a lot of game left in him. So he could move up to the third line and still.
Fourth line centers are easy to replace. Just remember that. Yeah, that's the harder part. Replacing the third line center is going to be the harder part. So you got to think of it in terms of asset management. You have a third line center that you could put there. Yeah. The fourth line center is far easier to replace.
I'm actually going to go beer on this because I am a big guy that praises JG Pajot's game. Although I wonder if the physical game is kind of taking a toll on him as game overall. He did have 40 points last year, but I think only 17 goals. It's one of those things that the Islanders do have a luxury, as Phil said before. They've got a luxury of centers, an amount of centers, so you can move one out, and even if you can move him out, let's say eat $2 million of that contract, or even make a full hockey trade, get rid of the full contract because he's got 2 more years at $5 million, and then you get rid of Josh Bailey at the same time. that clears up close to $10 million. The Islanders could go out and make noise, get a big free agent, and then because the Islanders have something else that they could do. Zach Parise hasn't made up his mind yet. So even if you take away from the wing, you might be able to convince Parise to come back for one more season. And then you have Parise under $1 million. He just scored 20 goals this year. So I think the Islanders have that ability to do that.
I think
is it something you plan on? I know you're shaking your head, Phil. Go ahead.
I think he's getting a raise if he comes back. I think he's making more than $1 million, maybe closer to $2 million if he comes back.
It's still a great discount.
Oh, of course.
Anthony, who'd you take right now? Zach Parise at $2 million or Josh Bailey at his full contract?
Zach
layup.
Yeah, Zach Parise, no question about it.
Layup.
Yeah, because that's the big thing, guys. It's not just a matter of who you get. You can get anybody, but you have to get the right player. Speaking of getting the right player, the Vegas Golden Knights got Ivan Barbashev, 7 goals and 11 assists, 18 points in the playoffs. He was fantastic on that line with Jack Eichel and Jonathan Marchessault. Chris Drury made a mistake by acquiring Patrick Kane over Ivan Barbashev. Phil.
I feel like you're recycling things now because I've already talked about this quite a few times, actually. So, yeah, I'm going to say round at this point just because I think that they needed more grit. And it's nothing against Patrick Kane, who actually played all right. It's the fact that they needed somebody who could give you a little more physically, that had a little more speed, that was built more to play in the playoffs. And that's, hindsight's 2020. And you thought maybe Patrick Kane was holding out, going to save that extra gear for the playoffs. And he did at times. At times, he was one of the better Ranger forwards. But Ivan Barbashev probably would have been able to give in this team a little more at both ends of the ice, and that would have helped them, especially against the Devils, who really smothered them with their speed.
Anthony.
Mark, I was banging this drum a lot, saying that I thought Drury should have won a guy like Barbashev, would have made more sense. And again, I get why he got Kane. The guy was basically begging to play for your franchise. He's one of the best American-born players ever, so I think Drury felt obligated. But, man, Barbashev would have fit the Rangers much better and would have made them much more of a dangerous team in the playoffs. So, like Phil said, hindsight's 2020, but this is a round. And I got to tell you about Barbashev, he's going to be laughing all the way to the bank because there are going to be a lot of teams come July 1st that are calling his agent and his phone, blowing it up after his playoff performance. That combined with, his 60-point season
I was just going to say that.
Year in St. Louis. He's a real solid player, and he's going to garner a lot of interest. Could Drury, right or wrong? Maybe if he works the cap, maybe I still think he fits the Rangers, but I think he's going to be in high interest this summer.
I'm actually not going to make this a hat trick, guys. I'm going to go down the beer on this. And the reason why is just because the asking price was just a little bit too high on Barbashev. It's so hard to believe that, it would have been a top prospect and definitely a first-round pick. It is hard to believe that the Rangers
it was just Zach Dean who was a top prospect.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you would have had to give him something up along the lines of like Brennan Hoffman.
Yeah, I'm not giving up Brennan Hoffman. Not right now. Because I don't know exactly what I'm getting from Kakko and Lafreniere, even though I'm writing an article right now about how the Rangers can't give up on him yet. But the thing about it is that the asking price was probably a little bit too high. It was less to get Patrick Kane. Kane was knocking on the door to get here. You had Panarin and just trying to campaign to get him here. Even Kane was himself was saying it in the media. So you kind of thought, all right, maybe this could work. And, if you got lightning in a bottle, Patrick Kane from 2013, then that would have been fantastic, or 2015, either one. But unfortunately, they got Patrick Kane with a bad hip. Not really much you could do about that. Guys, the Las Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup last night. And we've had not many repeats the last couple of years. We've had a couple back-to-back ones, Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh before that. And Pittsburgh was the first back-to-back champ since Detroit.
98.
Yeah. The Vegas Golden Knights will win another Stanley Cup within the next 3 seasons. And I'll start with you, Phil.
I'm going to say shot. I really wonder when the cap problems start to come into play. I think they're losing Barbashev this offseason, like Anthony said. He had a 60-point year a couple of years ago. Real big playoff year for them. Key contributor. He's going to get paid. People get paid from playoff runs. You look at Brian Bickle. It's one of the more recent ones that you could take a look at. He had a great playoff run in 2013. He got paid for it. He ended up getting sent to Carolina, and Chicago had to give up Teuvo Teravainen to make that deal happen to Carolina, which is crazy to think about. But I really – Vegas has a good core. I think they're going to be contenders for a while. I don't know if they're going to win one. I think Colorado's going to eventually be back. I wonder about Gabriel Landeskog and what's going to happen for his career, because he's going to be out for the year, and who knows what's going to happen with him going forward. But Colorado's got a ton of pieces regardless. And then you've got a great core between, McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, Taves. They've got pieces in place. So I really look for Colorado to make a rebound next year, because they're probably going to go out and make a big acquisition with the space that they're going to get from Landeskog's LTIR. And then, Dallas, I know that the question is going to be with Dallas, when does the clock strike on Joe Pavelski? You know what? We all thought it was going to be this year, and then it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And Pavelski's game is not predicated on speed or anything else. The only thing you got to worry about with him is the head now. It's the concussions. Mm-hmm. So when does that catch up to him? When does he decide to finally hang it up? You got to look at teams like, I would say, Florida could go and make moves and be back there. Depending on what they do with the goaltending, they could be back if they add some depth. The Rangers, if they get things right, could be there. If they buy into Laviolette, maybe they end up getting there. You've got other teams that are ready to make that that next step, and you've got some young teams that are going to be on the rise. The Devils are going to be a team that you're going to have to worry about for years to come. So I see it as a shot.
Okay. Oh, a shot. All right. Yeah. Anthony?
I can go beer. I think for the most part, next year their team won't look totally different. Barbashev might not be back, and Brett Howden's an RFA. He'll get re-signed. But a lot of their core, like Eichel and Riley Smith, Carlson, Stone, they're all locked up defensive-wise. A lot of their defensemen are signed for the next couple of years.
LTIR, you got to remember that, though.
Yeah, that is true. But I don't know. I think it's hard to say, because listen, there's so many good teams. But again, next year I think they're going to have a very similar team. I like their core. So yeah, it's possible. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but I'm not going to say round or shot just because I can't definitively say. But I think next year they'll be right back up there with Colorado and Dallas, and who knows, anything can happen. So I'll go beer.
I have to go beer on this. I can't go round and guarantee it, because I think I got to agree with Phil. At what time does cap penalties and the cap just catch up to them? When does their talent pool catch up to them? Because they traded basically everybody that ever was associated with them at the beginning and in the first round, and so they can go and make this run. The other thing is they are well coached. You get the people that say, hey, Vegas doesn't deserve it. Well, why? They beat the Florida Panthers, who were the darling of the playoffs. They beat the Dallas Stars, who were a damn good team in the regular season and a team that is going to be reckoned with next year. They beat the best player in the game and the second best player in the game. And every time in this playoff run that you counted Vegas out, they not only won the next game, but usually it was a resounding win. They had a couple of OT games in Winnipeg that could have gone the other way and been disastrous for them. But instead, they end up winning that series in 5. Vegas is going to be a team to be reckoned with. Do they win another cup? I can't guarantee that. There's no way I could do that. But looking at that crowd outside of T-Mobile Arena, right by New York, Phil, we were standing there last year during our video for the game. that the large crowds outside of there, 19,000 packed into that arena. Vegas is a top 10 hockey town. Guys, I'm going to start this right now, and I'm going to buy around on this. I'm almost going to say it's a layup. You could say whether or not it's not, but it's a tourist destination. They have gravitated to the hockey team, just like Nashville. They were the first one in town. I was referring to the Nashville Predators, obviously, because the Titans got there second. But this has been like Vegas born, to borrow their hashtag. Anthony?
I mean, yeah. Listen, hockey kind of worked in Vegas right from the start. So they, you saw the shots last night of everyone outside just filling up the entire area. I do know hockey is very, very popular in Vegas. My wife's cousin, they live out there, and he says that, the Golden Knights are like the biggest thing out there. So yeah, I mean, I don't I'm not going to sit here and try to name, 9 better markets than them or whatnot, or actually say a number on it, but just kind of generally speaking, yeah, sure, they're a hockey town. They work there. The fans love their team. Atmosphere is great in the building, one of the best from what I hear. So I'll go around here.
Phil.
I mean, I know Anthony didn't want to get into numbers just because of the fact that he didn't really want to play I guess the numbers game and ranking, and I mean, when I think about it, I mean, immediately right off the bat, I go to the 2 top Canadian teams. I go to Toronto and I go to Montreal, and I say those are probably the 2 biggest hockey markets that are out there right now. I look at the Rangers. I look at them because they're a big market and their games are almost always sold out. They're almost always to capacity, and in the playoffs, the Garden is just nuts in the playoffs. If you've ever been to a playoff game in the Garden, you could definitely argue it. I would say I'm gonna say beer. I think that they've gotten a really strong market, and I'm happy that they're actually succeeding, because if this project would have failed, then people would have been looking at Gary Bettman like, what the hell are you doing? And I think maybe Gary Bettman's head gets called for at that point. But Vegas succeeding the way that they did, having that first season the way that they did, and just even being there when we were there last February, not this past one, but the one before, February 22 for the All-Star game, just the atmosphere around it, and then like having teams close to them, like Arizona is close to them. You got the California teams that aren't too far. Like Vegas has had hockey. The roller hockey's been popular in Vegas for a long time as well. So this has worked out really well, and I'm happy that they have. So let's see Seattle with that same success. And, hopefully Seattle continues to push forward and get better, so that this way they can go and say they have the same rule. We've lost Anthony there. But, hopefully Seattle has a similar, level of success going forward. But, yeah, I would say there's definitely an argument to Vegas being top 10.
And of course, unfortunately, we have to mention that when the franchise started, the shooting that happened at Mandalay Bay, the Golden Knights really galvanized with the community, helping it heal, and they're part of that city. That city is just as much Las Vegas Golden Knights hockey as it is. It's probably more so Vegas Golden Knights hockey than it is Raiders football. Raiders are sort of like, to borrow almost, I don't want to use the term, but borrowing a Civil War term, carpetbagger. They just kind of came on in. That's just, or mercenary, you argue. They just came in because they were like, oh, hey. And now you got the A's that are going to be going there likely soon. And I'm trying to run out a little bit more time to make sure I got Anthony coming back in a second. We might have to start the next one already, as we're up to about 59 minutes on the show.
Yeah.
All right. Phil, Florida Panthers. They had 6 overtime wins out of 13 in the playoffs. I mentioned that in the A block. The Panthers were more of a Cinderella run than a contender run.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to look at it that way. I'm going to stay around here just because I think a lot of people will look at it this way. And it's not just because of the overtime wins, but the fact that they snuck into the playoffs. They had to basically take down the beast that was the Boston Bruins. Funny enough that their mascot is basically a bear. What they're based around is a giant bear, a Bruin. So the Cat took down the bear, and they went on to Toronto. Toronto was then, I don't think Toronto was favored by any means, just because Florida took down the best team in the league, took down a 65-win team. And then, I would say that they are I would say it was more of a Cinderella run. And I wouldn't look at them as like a contender. I think they'd have to make some real moves to get back, and then maybe get a little lucky again. But again, poker players will tell you they'd rather be lucky than good, because you can make all the moves in the world, all the right moves, still lose. But you need that luck sometimes to really win.
Anthony, what do you think? Were the Panthers more of a Cinderella run than a contender?
Yeah, I think so. I think absolutely. They were expected to be a lot better this season going into the year based on last year's season. But I think for sure just how they got in the playoffs, how Bobrovsky found his game at the right time. Tkachuk was basically anything he touched went into the net, especially in clutch moments. So I think this is a round. And honestly, based on their team and what they have going on, the cap situation, I think next year, I don't think it's a guarantee they make the playoffs. I think they'll be in a battle. Their division's real good. There's going to be better teams battling for the wild card. Other teams are going to improve. So I don't think it's a lock they even make the playoffs next year. I think it's going to be a dog fight the whole time. So we'll see.
I think it's a little bit of both, and that's why I'm going to go down the beer on this. I think that they were trying to build a game that was going to be successful in the playoffs. I think that's what they were working towards the entire time. And it was a process, and everybody kept on saying, well, they're built for the playoffs. They're not really built for the regular season. Well, you still got to make the playoffs. That's part of the problem. But getting to them, once they beat the Bruins, and all along I said to people, I got Bruins in 6. I don't think it's going to be all that easy. Oh, no. What are you, crazy? No, Florida's a good team. They're going to run. Bobrovsky turning into a wall was something they didn't expect. No. He really wasn't in game 6. But again, I keep going back to game 6 as being a more impressive thing. Sure, winning in overtime is one thing. But when you win a back and forth game where you had the lead in game 6, they lost the lead. They got it back. They lost it again. And then they tie it with Tkachuk and then win it. I always want to call him Luosterainen, but I think that's the wrong name. It's the really long Finnish name.
You're Luosterainen.
Okay, thank you. Florida definitely had the moxie, and after the second round, when they served notice to Toronto that they're for real, they really served that notice to Carolina. I know Pete will tell me Carolina, they really had more chances. They outplayed them. Their goaltender was amazing, but when Florida needed the goal, Florida got it. It's just that simple. And I do think this lean Cinderella run, but it was more like luck by design, if you will, as you were saying with poker. So, and there's lots of times it's sort of like Florida had an open-ended straight draw and flush draw the entire time, to borrow the poker term.
Yeah.
All right. By the way, we have an article from one of our new writers, to pay or not to pay Jesper Bratt. That is on BigAppleHockeyPodcast.com from Neil from Devil's State of Mind. Everybody check that out. And Philk, the dying question right now is both Jesper Bratt and Timo Meier are both RFAs this year and are both going to be paid big money. Anthony, I'll start with you. The Devils will have more difficulty signing Bratt than they will Meyer.
It's a tough question. I both think, after Bratt only getting, a 1-year deal last offseason would surprise some people. I think this is the year he's going to get a long-term deal. I think Meyer, is going to look to cash in too. It's just, he's one more year RFA year left. So I guess theoretically they could sign him to a 1-year deal and kick the can down the road like they did with Bratt. But I don't know. Based on what they did with Bratt last summer, I tend to think that this is accurate. I think Bratt might be a little bit harder. They invested a lot in the trade for Meyer, so I certainly think they're going to do everything they can to, retain him and give him a long-term deal. I would imagine both in a perfect world would want 8 years. I don't know if the Devils are going to give 8 to both, but you're looking at 8 million AAV for both of them probably. I think that's the ballpark you're looking in. So the Devils are going to invest a lot of years and money in these two. However, I do think Meyer is going to be a little bit easier. So I'll go around here.
Phil, what do you think?
I think that's absolutely around. I think they may even look to move Bratt. I just think that when I look at that team, I look at a team that may have cap problems in the future if they go and spend a bunch of big money on both of these guys. So in the next few years, you're looking at, thankfully they got Jack Hughes under control. They got Nico Hischier under control. They have Andre Palat at $6 million for another 4 years going forward. You're going to have to worry about giving deals to Dawson Mercer after next year. And then restricted free agents this upcoming offseason. Nathan Bastian, Jesper Boquist, Jesper Bratt, Michael McLeod, Timo Meyer, Igor Sharangovich, and then unrestricted, Hala, Wood, Tatar. Are they going to look to bring back Miles Wood, or are they finally going to move on from him? Eric Hala will probably get money elsewhere, I would imagine. Tomas Tatar, I think he goes to the highest bidder. I don't think he's back. But then again, you got to replace that production somewhere, somehow. So for me, I know that they have a ton of cap space to work with because they just don't have anyone. They only have really 4 forwards right now under contract. And then they have 4 defensemen. And then they have 5 technically with Luke Hughes. But, they have 5 defensemen under contract. And then Kevin Ball is a RFA. Ryan Graves is a UFA. And then you got to worry about Mackenzie Blackwood. Are you bringing him back, or are you going with Vanacek and Schmid? I'd imagine Vanacek or Blackwood is probably dealt because he's a restricted free agent.
Yeah, I heard they might not tender him. They might.
If they don't tender him, that's interesting. Instead of getting something for him, but I wonder if they can really go and give Jesper Bratt that type of money, because I don't think Jesper Bratt scores what he scores without playing with Jack Hughes, and that to me is going to be the biggest thing when they have to take a look at that. He's a good skater, but he was abysmal in the playoffs after the Rangers series. Abysmal against Carolina. So do they really want to go and give him a bunch of money with the series that he had after that, knowing that that's the type of play that they may get from him going forward in big situations? I don't know. I'd imagine they'll probably make an effort to sign him, but where's the cutoff point with them? Where is Tom Fitzgerald's cutoff point with him? Because if you're going to give him money close to what Timo Meyer's making, Timo Meyer's got the pedigree to command what he might end up commanding. Jesper Bratt, I don't think, has that type of pedigree. So that's the discussions that I imagine that they have back there. But yeah, they're definitely going to have a lot more difficulties signing Bratt.
Let's make it a hat trick, guys, because I think it's definitely going to be around on this. I think Bratt is going to really kind of make it difficult for the Devils. There is a short-term deal that they were looking at so he can cash in on his UFA years. There is a long-term deal that he's looking at. But I also think, as Anthony and I discussed, you weren't available when we did it last year, Phil. But when they went to arbitration with Bratt, they should have signed him. They should have signed him long-term. And instead, now it ends up being a very sticky contract situation. And he put up back-to-back 70-point seasons, a 30-goal season this year. He's going to look over and just go, what more do you want from me? And yeah, Jack Hughes might have a factor with him, but I think this guy's coming into his own. I think this guy is really becoming something special. If you move on from him, go right ahead. More power to you, but do it with conviction. And I don't want to hear any Devils fans say, we gave up on Jesper Bratt too early. Who'd have thought we gave up on a player too early? It would be something said around here, because there was a player that the Devils did give up on this week, and it does kind of help their cap situation. They traded Damon Severson to Columbus in a 3-team trade, and then, or no, that was just a trade, I think, and then signed him. Yeah, I was thinking that the one before that with Provorov. And then they signed him to an 8-year deal for $6.25 million per year. Philk, Columbus grossly overpaid for Damon Severson.
It's technically a sign and trade. So New Jersey actually gave him the deal and then dealt him to Columbus. So, but yeah, they did they're paying a price for him. And I just don't think he's that good. I don't. I think that he's a guy that scored you 35 or so, maybe 40 points in a good year. An okay puck mover. This is not an impact player. I don't see him as somebody that's worth $6.25 million in an 8-year deal. Just that, and then they gave up all the, I just don't understand it. You could have gotten him in UFA, and I don't know if anyone would have given him $6.25 million in UFA. Was there a team that maybe would have done it? I don't know. Usually they say there's always one team that'll go out and make that ridiculous deal, but I don't know. Damon Severson just doesn't seem like that good of a player.
Anthony?
The years are too much for a player like him. And the dollar amount is a little high for my liking. But they call this the silly season, right? I mean, free agent, I know it's not even free agency, it's not even free agency yet, but teams do it all the time. You know, they have a need, they see a player, and they overpay him. It's just it's just how it goes. And I think when you combine the fact that based on the amount of offensive defensemen out there, I mean, the list isn't too great. I mean, you have Klinberg, Dumba. I mean, there's not much out there, and the Blue Jackets likely looked at it as, this is a guy that has, 2 11-goal seasons to his name, a 40-point year or 39-point season, and their defense needed a lot of help, and they decided to do it. So, I mean, perfect world, I'd like him at 5 years, maybe $5.5 million, $5 million, but it's just not realistic in this climate. Again, I mean, whether you like it or not, this is how it is. So I'll go beer. I don't like the deal, but when you consider everything you got to consider when it comes to, free agency, I don't know if I would say grossly overpaid, but he did get overpaid.
Oh man,
Woof.
They're spending $10 million on Severson and Goodbranson.
Woof.
I gotta go. I gotta go round on this one, guys. This is all. You know what? We haven't had one yet. This is a layup. I'm gonna go definite layup on this one. You mean to tell me that a guy? I understand the point production. Let's look at the point production for a second. 46 points last season, 33 this season, 31, 39. He's had 21, 24, 31, 21, 17. That's all good and well and good. Now you want to tell me that there are other numbers that don't matter. Maybe this one's overrated. Let's look at his plus minus for a second. Minus 13, minus 8, minus 31, minus 8, minus 27, minus 20, minus 8, minus 14, and plus 9. He's a minus 120 for his career. He's a defenseman in name only. And I actually kind of like Damon Severson. I would take him on my team, but at 8 years.
Plus minus is one of the most misleading. I mean, to me, not really all that important.
Yeah, but here's the problem. When it's that bad, that means that there's something really wrong with you.
And yeah. I mean, that is fair. But he's also played for a Devils team that's been bad for the majority of the time that he spent there.
Minus 120. Like if he was a minus, like I don't know, 30 or something like that. Okay, fine.
2018, they made the playoffs. His fourth year, he was 23 years old, minus 8. 2019, they were supposed to be a team on the rise, minus 27, then minus 20. Then he's bucked up to a minus 8 in 56 games 2 years ago, and then minus 14 last year. I'm sorry, no, we could say plus minus isn't right, but there's times where it is. It's an interpretive stat.
Have you watched the guy play defense?
Yeah.
If you've watched a guy play defense, you know that he's on the level of somebody like Tony DeAngelo defensively.
Yeah, that's pretty damning. But people in hell want ice water. And speaking about which,
that's the problem. Like you grossly overpaid a guy to be a top level puck moving defenseman. Like if you're giving him $6 million. You're expecting 40 to 50 points,
and for 8 seasons
every year. And you gave him 8 years, and you want that player to be halfway, at least passable defensively. He's not passable defensively, and he's not a top flight puck mover.
Well, speaking about which, and grossly overpaying players, it's reported by The Athletic that Pierre-Luc Dubois is seeking $9 million on his average for his next contract. Anthony, I'll start with you. It's insane to pay PLD $9 million annually.
I don't think it's as insane as you think. I'll go beer. I just think a guy like him, he's young. He plays the center position. He's got size. He's got skill. Teams drool over players like that. So, I mean, you look at, I know Barzell's used as comparable. In this day and age now, it seems like, you don't have to be a 100-point player to get $9-10 million a year. It's based on the actual skill and talent that you possess that you're going to bring to a club. So, plus, I also think there's a higher ceiling that PLD can reach when it comes to his offensive production. Like I don't think he's hit a plateau at all. So I think there's more to his game. So no, I don't think it's insane to pay him that. It's almost like I said, it's almost like the going rate now for a center of his caliber. So you may not like him. I get that. He's essentially, X'd out of what? Two teams right now so far in his career. So if you cannot like that, or how his time ended in Columbus. He pouted a little bit. I don't like that shit, but he's going to be in high demand. I think he's only going to give them 5 or 6 teams that he'll go to, but I think a lot of teams in the National Hockey League would love to have him on the roster. So yeah, no, it's not insane, and so I almost borderline on shot here, but I'll stick to a beer. But I don't think it's insane to pay him $9 million AAV.
Felk, what do you think?
I don't think it's necessarily insane. You're using the word insane, so I'm going to say shot. Would I necessarily pay him $9 million? No, but I get that he's using Barzell as a comparable. And Barzal, aside from his one rookie year, has been a 60-point player. And that's exactly what they're looking at. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to connect the dots on that one. So I would say that I necessarily wouldn't. I don't think it's insane at all. It's just kind of like what Anthony said. It's what the market is right now. I would prefer to keep him at 7.5 to 8 million. I mean, that would be where I would think that I would like to have him. But I do agree with Anthony, though. He was on pace for 70 points this year. So I think that there is definitely another level that I think he could get to. And I think if you put him with the right players and you give him the first line minutes, maybe he gets to 70 to 80 points. And you're looking at that and you're saying, hey, you know what? What if he becomes an 80-point player and he's making $9 million a year? That's a bargain right now, I would say. So I don't think it's really insane at all.
And before Marc
I'm going around on this, guys. I'm not a fan of us. And again, you're going to pay a guy $9 million a season. You better make sure he's committed to your franchise. He's asked out of 2 franchises already. Let's say, for instance, because he's always rumored to go to the Rangers, which I would love to know the magical cap space that they have to fit him in at $9 million per. I know I heard trading Hedel, trading Trocheck, trading Lafreniere. Yeah, Trocheck's got a no trade clause. Lafreniere and Hedel are better values for the money than a $9 million Pierre-Luc Dubois. I'm 63 points. That's what we're hanging our head on. This amazing guy. I agree with you, Anthony. I think there's another level this guy could get to. And wouldn't it be great if it happens to the next one? You know what is even better? Actually knowing that he's going to do that. Like then, if he did it once before, Matt Barzal at least did 85 points. I saw it. Now, or was it 84, Anthony? I'm sorry. I forget. It's 85. Good. All right. So I at least saw that with my own eyes. I have yet to see this guy get to 64 points, and he's bitched his way out of 2 organizations.
Marc, about Pierre-Luc Dubois. Look, I don't like how he left Columbus, but you know,
and the way he's leaving.
Look,
Winnipeg.
He's seeing what Matthew Tkachuk did last year, right? Matthew Tkachuk was an RFA, but yet he acted like pretty much a UFA.
Yeah, Matthew Tkachuk was coming off a 100-point season.
No, I know that, but what I'm saying is that these guys now they've kind of you could kind of find a loophole when you're an RFA to sort of pick where you want to play. Yes, and normally I agree with a lot of things Core says, but I just got to say he's not. I think his preference is to play for Montreal, but it's been speculated about where he's going to go, and he's going to give Winnipeg, a list of probably 5 or 6 teams that he go to. It's rumored he'll go to LA, Minnesota. Oddly enough, was one on one of the lists I saw. The Rangers, of course, the Canadians, but I think wherever he goes, I think he's finally going to sign a long-term deal. That's what's being said. So I don't know if he's actually going to get his wish and go to Montreal, only because who does Montreal have to give to Winnipeg? They're not trading Kirby Dach, who they just invested in and had a pretty good year. So I don't see it going to Montreal. I think it seems like LA is at the forefront here. So we'll see what happens. But as far as the Rangers go aspect of it, Marc, they're more listed as like a from what I've read, like a dark horse. They're not really a front runner for him, but I don't see it happening because I don't see Trocheck waiving his no movement clause, and they just re-signed Philip Hedel, and then there's the cap aspect to it. But
I always see it. The reports from guys, Anthony, they're like, oh well, the Rangers can't get him, and why would they? What are they going to do with him?
I honestly think that Marc was just piggybacking off of an old rumor from a couple of years ago and I brought that up on my Twitter. I remember when that was happening. I was like, maybe the Rangers could go after Dubois and get him, and he would be, a good fit there. But it's been more of like Okay, so the New York Yankees are in on him because the New York Yankees are the New York Yankees, and I think
Exactly.
That's what we're doing here.
And by the way, let me try this anyway. En colère. Maybe. I don't know. I can't check the speaker.
I would love to know if Mark's pronunciation was right on that, because if he can pronounce that right, and then he can't pronunciate La Violette correctly,
because I think I always move the O and the I the other way, so I have to train my brain to say that.
You move the L, you move the other L in the let right after the V. You say La Violette.
Yeah, that's.
Marc,
by the way, Big Lou.
Marc,
If you asked him to say angry in French, he would just go angry in French. Get out of here.
Marc
probably would. He probably would.
If we happen to get to the draft in Nashville, I'm gonna somehow get you next to Big Lou on the floor and just see how that goes. I gotta do it. I think everyone on here would want me to do it. But that would be must see viewing.
Well, I'll see. There's actually 2 more topics we got for Bar Talk right now. That'd be great. We'll do some more in the Q&A, quick Q&A, because I know Phil's got to run, and so do I, by the way, but at least a little bit longer. But guys, going back to the finals, obviously when it's all over, all the injuries come out, and look no further than the Florida Panthers. You got Aaron Ekblad, broken foot since the first round. Matthew Tkachuk, I didn't call him Keith, broken sternum. And that was in game 3, he had that. And Anthony's got a story about that in a second. Brandon Montour, torn labrum, and he's going to need surgery. He's out the next 3 to 4 months. Hockey players are the toughest players in sports.
This is such a like my sport post, but yeah, I'm going to go with round. Just because they wear the least amount of they wear a really small amount of padding compared to like football players. Baseball is not really a contact sport, neither is basketball. But I mean, the injuries that they deal with are turf toe and all that other crap. Yeah, I get that's annoying and it hurts, but hockey players take pucks to the face and they come back the next shift. So yeah, like my sport. I'm done there. Moving on.
Okay, so we're going to go with the round on that one. I'm actually going to tap it again and say round on this one. Now, look, when you look at baseball, I'm trying to think of, I think it was Jack Youngblood in football. He played with a broken leg. Kirk Gibson in the 1988 World Series could barely stand. What?
I think that was a torn ACL, right?
I think it was. He could barely stand. And he ended up homering off for Dennis Eckersley to win game 1 of the World Series en route to a Dodgers sweep. Yeah. But the baseball players are now so babied that they can't even try to be tough. I mean, Aaron Judge did a great job last year because he was having a historic season and it was also his contract year. So it was basically, screw you, I'm staying in the lineup. Don't worry about that. Now football players can be very tough. Hockey players, hearing what they endure, and especially when the series is over.
Football players play 1 day a week.
Yeah, and
1 day a week. Hockey players are playing 4 times a week. Sorry, and it's a longer schedule. It's over more months.
Especially when it comes to these playoffs, Anthony.
Yeah, it's around. I mean, you hear the stories of what the guys play through. You just saw it with the players you listed at the bottom before. They're just a different breed. I mean, they're just conditioned to just do whatever they can to stay on the ice and help their teammates and really get in the battle. I mean, it was perfect example is with Morgan Barron in the playoffs where he got the skate to the face. He had 75 stitches and he came back and he played. I mean, imagine getting 75 stitches in your face, what that must feel like, and then come back and play. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean,
I hate getting one stitch.
Chuck has a fractured sternum, and he scores a tying goal in Game 3 in the front of the net where there's sticks and bodies on him, and I mean, forget about it. A fractured sternum, Marc's not getting out of bed for 6 months. This is
let alone going to the front of the net in a Stanley Cup final game.
They're insane. Easy round.
Yeah, that's an easy round on that one. And so we'll do that one more time. Guys, I did throw this one in there at the last second. This is another easy round, I think, for all of us. It's going to be a layup. But Anthony, I'll start with you. The NHL on TNT is far better than the NHL on ESPN.
Yeah, I mean, round.
We really got into the layup talk segment.
Yeah, they're just much more entertaining with Gretzky and Biz and Anson Carter, Liam McHugh. They got great chemistry.
Don't forget Henrik.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. I love watching them. I mean, ESPN, they had the name power to it. It was like, Messier and Chelios and PK Subban but I don't know. Their coverage is more. It's more kind of just vanilla, like bland. TNT, I think, does much better job at the presentation from everything from A to Z. I don't know what ESPN has to do to make it a little better, maybe a little less robotic, but yeah, I think this is a round, an easy round.
Felk. Obviously, it's an easy round. Yeah, there's the layup for you, but go ahead.
You guys have already said everything, and not only that, but the production value is just crap on ESPN. I don't know what happened with their production. They used to produce it so much better back in the day. It's funny. I was watching clips because and my YouTube suggested, like, I'll get random regular season and playoff games, or whether it's full games or highlights from like the 90s. And I was watching Scotty Bowman's 1,000th career win, Detroit and Pittsburgh, and I think it was a 7-6 overtime win in which Brendan Shanahan capped off a hat trick in overtime. And even the production on the Fox on NHL post with like the cartoony graphics with the robots was still better than what they were doing with ESPN. There was no audio issues, lighting issues, anything like that. Like ESPN really, like, they came back with second-rate coverage. And that's just how bad it's been. And then you add like the bad commentary that they have from certain commentators. I'm not going to call out anybody, but it's already been discussed. A lot of people know which public enemies I'm talking about there. But it feels like they're just putting out a product to get eyes, and they're not really putting their heart and their soul into it. And that sucks. So I hope that they improve it.
Yeah, the ESPN's a far cry from what it used to be, and the worst part is they have the elements to make it great. They're just not. And I've taken my shots that I shouldn't be taking at certain people on there, but and even they're not really shots; they're more like just comments. But they should have a much more entertaining studio. The one part that was somewhat entertaining when it looked like Messier and Subban were going to fight at one point this year during their coverage. I want to say it was back in March, but there you have that studio crew, and it's just boring. And yet, on the other hand, we talk about it being vanilla, Anthony. There was nobody more vanilla in the NHL, and intentionally so, than Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky had an autobiography written about him that he said, it's great, but you're going to have to take out all this stuff. I can't be a controversial figure. What happens now? He goes to TNT. You're thinking, he's going to just be vanilla with his coverage. Everybody's great. And he's got the line of the year when Biz looks at him and says, you got all these Oilers. And then Gretzky looking back saying, why are you taking a shot at the Oilers? Toronto's got guys on milk cartons. So it's like that, the energy in TNT. And a matter of fact, the cross promotion with TNT, like Matthew Tkachuk was on the NBA on TNT.
Yeah,
you had Charles Barkley on the NHL on TNT.
Wrestling fans, AEW promotes hockey well.
Yes, like this is stuff that you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to have your morning show host taking shots at your sport. Don't know who I'm talking about, but his initials are SAS. But even when I get back on his side, then he's got to throw me back off of there. That's another thing too. It's just you got to promote your sport and you got to have your league promote your asset.
Yeah,
So of course the better.
I'm with this too. Jackie Redmond has been awesome for TNT. I love me some Jackie Redmond. I'm a huge fan. We all know that. But Jackie's been awesome for TNT. So
yeah, and it's not just because she's hot. There's she does a great job. She's been basically the lead anchor for
Jackie
ESPN Network.
On Twitter.
A what?
I did once call her Jackie Zero Fucks Given Redmond after she roasted somebody on her Twitter account.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Guys, thanks very much for Big Apple Hockey Bar Talk. We were gauging our topic on NHL topics. We're gauging we're gauging our confidence on NHL topics based on our choice of drinks. See, when you talk too much, it's just what happens. Let's go to some of your questions. We're running short on time, but let's get some of them, what you guys might have right now. Most boring Stanley Cup snooze fest.
Yeah, it is. It just wasn't a highly entertaining series.
Core, my shortest answer is my girlfriend is the most beautiful girl in the world. Everyone else comes second. Not everyone else.
Yeah.
There are some people that are distant 137ths. So, but yeah, also I for one, and by the way, Gary Thorne, great commentator. I think he might be retired, but I always talked about
baseball.
Yeah. He was doing the Blue Jays and then they replaced him.
He's pretty up there in age now, Gary Thorne.
Yeah. All right. So I've loved this because this debate is something I had with Anthony and Errol years ago when we were on
75, by the way.
What?
75 years old. Yeah.
Oh,
Gary Thorne. Okay.
Yeah. So right now, I remember after the 2018 season, and that's when we were doing Off the Post. We were going between seasons, and Matthew Barzal just won the Calder, and you and Errol had said that he was going to be that way going forward, and I said, John Tavares leaving, and Barry Trotz coming in. His numbers were going to take a hit because he was going to have to, one, he was going to take the first line matchups, and two, he was going to be playing in a defensive system. But it's not just the system because Trotz is gone and he's still that player. Barzal's problem is not just that he plays in a certain system that may not tailor to his needs, but it's up here. It's up here. It's his decision-making process. It's holding on to the puck too long. It's making too many moves. It's skating around the offensive zone in a circle like he's Peter Forsberg 3 times before finally doing something with the puck. And then either losing the puck in the process or passing it to somebody who whiffs on a shot or doesn't convert, whoever it is. Would Matthew Barzal put up better points with a top-end sniper? Yeah, likely. I think he would be maybe a 75-point player or so, maybe 80 in a good year. But this is not a guy that's a 92, 100-point player. It's just not at this point. And the biggest problems with his game are this and his shot. His shot is not great. I'm not saying it's bad. It's not great. I'm calling him Derek Stepan, who had a shot softer than baby shit. But he doesn't have a great shot that goaltenders fear. And that's the thing. And that's why they don't respect it. And that's part of why he's not the elite point producer, because of his head and his shot. And you know what? He's a good player for what he is. He's a great skater, great stick handler. He's even a great passer. He makes great passes. But the problem is that what he has doesn't come together, and he just doesn't – he can't put it all together to become that elite level player. And I don't think you're going to see it at this point. Unless someone can get into his head and really rewire him. That's something tough to do as a player. Once you become that type of player, you become a certain way and your mindset's a certain way. It's really, really tough to rewire somebody like that. But I'm telling you right now, I don't think Matt Barzal is a 90-plus point player. I think at his best, maybe he gets back to 80. But to end it, really, who am I taking, Marner or Barzal in their draft here? Marner, and by a country mile, and that's why Marner went as high as he did in that draft year. So it's absolutely Marner.
Anthony, your thoughts on that?
Barzal had 51 points in 58 games this year. So what is that, like 70 points or so over 82 games?
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
So 70. So yeah, I think 80 points is, especially in another system. You know, if he's scoring, let's say he's going to be a 70-point player on the Islanders, I think he could be an 80-point player on a more wide open offensive team. But obviously that's not going to happen. He's going to be on the Islanders for the foreseeable future. So, you know, as long as they could get him, you know, if he could build some real solid chemistry with Horvat, which it looked like he had for the few games before he got hurt. You know, and Horvat's on point, I don't see any reason why, you know, Barzal can't score 75 points next year. And that's fine. I'm not going to sit there and say, damn, I wish he was 90-point player. I'll take 75 points from him all day. Hopefully he can get to that level. But I do think, again, you know, in another system where he could, you know, play fully unreined with his speed and skill, I do think he could reach 80. But again, it's not going to happen because he's not going to get traded. So you just have to live with him, let's say, being a 70-point player, and I'll take that. If it means winning championships and being a contender, you know, I'll take that all day than rather having an individual, you know, that's going to score 90 to 100 points, but you don't win. So we'll see what happens going forward. But
I think Phil hit on a couple things. I think you hit a couple things too. I think the guy definitely has the talent. He's a great passer, great skater. One of the better, like I used to say this when his first season came around, when he made like the decision, I'm cutting there, he was just amazing. He was like he just made a step, he was gone. He doesn't shoot the puck enough. And I think also, I know you said that before. And by the way, Phil, I'm getting to that one too. And Anthony, I'm also going to make another point about that. About why he's not shooting the puck sometimes, or why he's overpassing or underpassing or holding on to it too long, because he needs to work on his shot and he needs to get that better. And if he does, look out, because if you're telling me Matt Barzal could turn in a 30-goal season, you're looking at maybe a 100-point player. That's how good he could be. However, he's also played in a defensive-minded system. They've coached in responsibility to him. And he hasn't exactly had that top-flight talented player to play with. Kyle Palmieri is good, obviously, and right now Brock Nelson's passing him. So you got some guys. Imagine if he played with, say, an Artemi Panarin or maybe a Timo Meier, somebody that he could just say, I'm going to get you the puck, you just shoot it. And I think the hesitation would come out of it, and he would just throw it there, and guy shoots the puck, it goes in. Confidence goes up from there. I mean, who knows? Maybe Oliver Wahlstrom could develop something. If he had some top flight talent,
though.
What?
Here's the counterpoint to that, though. So if he goes and starts doing that, then the shot frequency is probably going to go down even more. So while there might be a slight uptick in points, it might not be enough to get him up to like 90, maybe even 80 at that point. Mm-hmm. Maybe it gets him from 65 to 75, maybe 80 in a good year. That's the problem. You're right. It's really the shot. Because look at the elite, like look at all the elite centers, like the elite level point centers, like Jack Eichel, great shot, 30-goal scorer. Nathan McKinnon, 30, 40-goal scorer. Sidney Crosby, usually good for 35 to 40 goals a year, has scored 50 before.
He's won 2 Rockets.
50. Crosby won 2 Rocket Richard trophies. I just don't see Matthew Barzal as that. And it's not just because I don't think the shot will ever get there. I just think he just doesn't have it in his wiring, in his head, to be that guy that shoots enough to where goaltenders start respecting that shot and say, oh, wait, he's not going to pass all the time. he might actually blow one past me.
Mark, you mentioned Brock Nelson, and the difference between Nelson and Barzal is Nelson has a elite shot and release. I mean, 36 goals last year, 37 this year. Nelson 75 points in 82 games. So Nelson kind of puts a kink in the theory of not being able to produce in a defensive system because he's doing it. But again, the biggest difference is Nelson has a shot that goalies know that he could beat him clean with. So when he has the puck, they have to respect his shot. And now what it's doing is he's also had 39 assists last year. So he's also passing more too. Whereas Barzal, goalies know that he's going to pass.
That's actually great point. I'm sorry, but I got to say something right off the top of my head, then I'll let you finish. But Nelson improved himself in this system. And he was a guy that was a loafer, was a one-way player, was hardly inconsistent. You know me. I like Nelson going back to North Dakota. Yeah. And I was all over him for years. And then all of a sudden, he improves under Trotz. And he improves again these last 2 years. So why is it that Barzal, who's more naturally talented, can't do that, but Nelson can?
I think it's because also everybody's selling on Barzal to pass all the time. And now he knows, and I think he's overthinking. And the worst decision is indecision because you're going, oh, wait, should I go there? No, should I go there? Matt Barzal was more instinctual his first few years, even under Trotz. And he has, we remember the goal against the Sabres. I'm going to bring that one up. Has nothing to do with a great shot or anything, but it does have to do with creativity and the balls for a guy to try that. That was unbelievable. Where's that guy? Where is that guy right now? Now, is it possible for his game to be there? Yeah. And also, by the way, he's a guy that wanted to stay with the Islanders as opposed to say when Tavares, I do think Tavares wanted to stay. We talked about that. Tavares left. So all these things can be commendable. There's room for improvement in his game, and we've seen him at his best, and we've also seen him at his worst. I think if you split the difference, you might get a guy that could be, as Anthony said, 70 points next year. But you know what? On the wing, you're going to need a guy that's going to shoot the puck more, unless that's what Horvat's going to do. If you got the center shooting whatever amount of shots, we'll say 200. That's a lot. So, all right.
I don't want to move. I don't want to move Nelson from center because he's really cooking right now. But I wonder why don't they try Barzal and Nelson together? Barzal, his passing ability might make Nelson even more prolific. But I don't know. I just think it's worth trying out. I mean, why? It's like your best playmaker and your best shooter. I don't know why they would, maybe try Barzal with Nelson instead of Horvat. But if worst comes to worst, it doesn't work. You change it.
Anthony, you were saying Nelson on Barzal's wing?
Well, I said I don't want to move Nelson from center because he's really comfortable and cooking right now. So then I said, why not just put Barzal on Nelson's wing rather than Horvat's?
Okay.
As the center.
I was going to say, you got a good two-way center there. I wouldn't mess with that.
Yeah, no. Stade, he's been playing wing basically since Horvat got here, so we're just going to anticipate that. Even though Lou did say they have 5 good centers. By the way, Phil, Rangers keep or trade their first-round pick?
Keep. I don't see a scenario in which they trade it unless somebody becomes available. Maybe they jump in on Pierre-Luc Dubois, even though I don't see that happening at all. But if they decide to jump in on him or someone like that, then they would trade that first-round pick unless they can find some sort of young, cost-controlled, like top-level talent that becomes available. That's the only way that I see them moving their first-round pick because you're going to need these picks. And this team is coming to a cap crunch. I don't see it.
Anthony, Wicked is asking over under on Horvat's point productions next season, assuming he's healthy, 65.
I would say about 65. Even Lou actually recognized when he talked about Horvat and how after Barzal got hurt, he struggled. He recognized that he's like, I know he was scoring at a 50-goal pace. He's like, but going forward, we realistically expect him to be, a 30, 35 goal guy. So I think even the Islanders brass, realistically knows he's not going to score at the level he did last year, but 30 goals is a realistic, expectation of him. So yeah, I think Horvat going forward being a 30-30 guy, so 30 goals, 30 assists, 60 points, 65 points. I think that's realistic. So him with Barzal, if they're healthy, yeah, I say 65 points is kind of right on target.
I would have to say probably in that area just to make it 65.5. So I have to say an over-under. I got a good feeling about him next year. I think he's going to be more settled in. I think he's going to have with the Islanders. He's going to have a house here. He's going to have a situation ready to go. Yep. And it's not like he was traded midseason. People forget about that. Having your family around all the time and being completely settled and your kids in school.
That's what he said too. He said, it took him a while to get settled. His family didn't get there until later on. And I think he's just going to be more comfortable this year. Full training camp, really, first one under his belt, build chemistry from day one. So I think he's going to play more like the Horvat he did when they first acquired him. Before Barzal got hurt, than he was the Horvat, towards the end of the year.
Right, like 70 points is a career high, and he blew away his career high, which was 61. That was back in 2019. But the guy consistently has been a 20 to 27 goal scorer, 31 last year, and then now 38 with the Islanders. And if I've said this before, I think this guy perfectly fits the New York Islanders and what they do. And I actually think you might see something closer to 70. I'm not going to blow it away. Maybe a little bit, but I'm not saying that's a bad thing in any way because I think Bo Horvat does a lot more for the team. And I started pointing over here, Anthony, because I think there's going to be a letter right there next year. So, and in
maybe,
what is it, 3 more years? What's it? 3 more years on Drizly?
I believe so. Yeah, 3. He signed. Okay. Yeah, he signed a 7-year deal. Yeah, I think 3. Yeah, I think it's 3 more years.
Okay, because once that's done, that's going to be a C on Bo Horvat.
Well, that's assuming he leaves.
And I think it's definitely going to be him. John's asking 6th defenseman for the Rangers, free agent or from the system. I think they're going to want it to be Matthew Robertson. They've been hoping on it, but Philk has not been optimistic about that. I was going to ask him about this. I'm going to say I think it's going to be somebody from the system because they already got Ben Harper signed for next year.
I think it's a veteran. Yeah, veteran D.
Hopefully they don't sign Patrick Nemeth for absolutely no reason.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up right here. Thanks everybody for being with us. And it is going to be it's going to be a long, silly season. Next week, we're going to be covering a lot of the draft, and hopefully we'll be covering the draft at the draft. That'll also be nice. Everybody, thank you very much, and we will see you next week.